Hey everyone, so I recently put a story out on my Instagram just asking people what their biggest challenge is with their photography. There's a big response, but there was one answer in particular that kept coming up over and over again, and that was people just talking about struggling to find subjects or locations or inspiration or ideas, especially in their local area. So I wanted to make this video today just to talk about what I think is one thing that can kind of often lead to that feeling, and then also talk about why working with a photo project or a theme can be a great solution and why they're so important. And then I'm also going to share just how I come up with ideas, some of the current projects that I have going on, and how I kind of manage everything. So to start, I want to quickly talk about what I think can be one reason why people sometimes struggle to find images and inspiration, especially close to home. I understand where they're coming from with this for sure. You know, the last probably like 3 years up until recently, the majority of my work was done traveling to the American Southwest in the deserts there. It's an incredibly unique landscape, one that I feel very connected with, and it's probably one of my favorite places I've ever shot. I feel I can get lost in it and just shoot for days, but it is a place where there is potential around every corner. There's just all of these very interesting elements, at least to me, and I know to some others as well. But, you know, back in Canada, in Ontario, which is where I'm from and where I grew up, and then also living here now in Southern England, I've always felt like you have to dig a lot deeper for images, which obviously there's absolutely nothing wrong with. But I think people who are in similar situations, if you live in an area or a city or a town that isn't, say, super interesting on the surface level, it can be easy to go out with this like singular image mindset where you're basically just looking for subjects and things that are going to jump out at you, these like flashy, dramatic scenes. And the problem with that is you're basically leaving everything up to chance. You're going out, you're crossing your fingers, you're hoping you find something that jumps out at you. And if you don't, then the day can kind of be a bust. And obviously there's always going to be an element of that with photography. It is part of the fun, just this unknown of going out to see what you find. But I think when you can have like a creative direction and a purpose behind your work, it can just unlock an immense amount of potential, and also just the way that you view your surrounding environment and landscape. So with that being said, I want to talk now about the importance of projects and themes and why they could be a solution for you if you're feeling unfulfilled with your work. But I really do think that, you know, like working under the umbrella of a project or a theme can really help you not only like find images everywhere, but it also helps you start developing like a unique creative vision and a voice, helps you tell a story, and just gives you this like platform to start creating unique work. And this is another thing that was mentioned a lot when people talked about challenges, is just, you know, how do I stand out, or how do I create work that's unique to myself? So what I want to do now is I want to actually show you a couple of images. This is from a recent project that I've been working on close to home here. And I feel like it'll be a good example because it's in an area that's quite normal. To be honest, it's kind of boring, but it's a project that I'm really excited about. And then I also just want to share some like practical advice and tips that you can use that'll help you start kind of developing ideas and finding ideas for projects in your area. So I've shared a little bit of this on my Instagram, not too much of it. I have 2 images here I'm going to show. This area, like I said, it's a place that's close to home, and it's like a really beautiful area, a nice place. I go down there quite often for walks and stuff, but it never jumped out at me as a place to go and photograph. There was like nothing that was kind of grabbing my attention when I'm down there. It's just a very kind of like normal, almost boring area. But I was down there the one morning with my daughter, just going for a walk, and I walked by this fella here. His name's Simon. I walked by his boat, and I, you know, kind of caught my attention a little bit, and I thought about, you know, I wonder who owns this. I wonder what their story is. So the next night I thought, I'm going to go down there with my camera and see if I can meet him. So went up to his boat that night. He came out. We ended up chatting for a little bit. Super nice fella, really interesting, and he let me make his portrait. So right away, you know, before I even saw this image, all of a sudden this area took on a complete different kind of shape than it had before when I was there, and it was just kind of this like normal looking landscape. And all of a sudden I started thinking, okay, you know, maybe there's something here. Like, I wonder who else lives on this river system or the river systems in England, in these canal boats? And what about the images I could make, other portraits of people and interiors and detail shots and learning about their stories. So the wheels started to kind of turn a little bit. And then the same evening I walked down the river a little bit more and I ended up meeting Tosh. He was fishing here along the river and ended up chatting with him for a bit, making his portrait and learning about his story, so just how he goes and fishes these different sections of the River Thames, how he's super interested in the history. He collects like vintage postcards of these different towns, how he wants to basically do the entire river system. And then I started, adding another layer. So thinking about, just how this is almost kind of like an escape for some people, these river systems that wind through these busy cities and towns in England can almost act as like this retreat for people to go and have like space and peace and quiet and stuff. So all of a sudden, this area that at first didn't interest me at all from a photography standpoint, now all of a sudden I just have endless ideas coming to me because there's this like structure, this potential structure of using these river systems as the base for a project and trying to meet people and learn about their stories and make these very intentional images now. And the cool thing, like I said before, is this starts unlocking the potential for images that you probably wouldn't even consider before. And there's one in particular, I haven't created it yet. I'm waiting for the light to be right, so I got to go back at another time. But there's this one spot on kind of the opposite riverbank that I walked by, and it's kind of like an interesting composition, has some like bunch of vertical reeds that come out of the foreground, and then there's this power line that runs across the river. And initially it kind of caught my attention just because of the composition, but then I started thinking about how that could fit into a story, how the power line crossing over the river kind of, helps symbolize or tell the story or contrast the fact that, people are living off grid in these boats, there's no power. And then also just how the power line itself kind of mimics the shape of a river, the way that it runs through the image. So all of a sudden, there's potential to create something where if I made that image and it wasn't linked to anything, it would just feel like this very kind of random picture. But now all of a sudden, it could potentially fit into a story like this and have, quite a strong purpose depending on how it's sequenced. So there's all of this potential now to create this like layer of images where you can start being very intentional with each one depending on how it's going to fall in line with others and what that can do for the overall project. So how can you apply this to your own work? I honestly think the most important thing is just to constantly be curious about everything about your environment. You can do this like everywhere. There's these types of things everywhere. So let's say you're walking down the street and you walk past like a lawn bowling club. Well, like who's in there? Who are the members of this club? I don't know anything about lawn bowling. I bet you there's some interesting characters. What's the interior like of the clubhouse? What's the history? I know this is a super random example, but it can apply to everything, even in a more like abstract way as well. Like maybe you're into landscape photography. Well, maybe you give yourself the theme of like photographing the countryside that's in your immediate area, and you add like a perimeter to it, and maybe you go and you learn about the history of this area and you find some specific story that then influences the way you approach that, the film choices that you use, and some of the images that you create. So I think it's all about just like be curious about everything, about places, about people, and start to kind of like compile a list of ideas. And that's what I want to talk about next. Some of the projects that I have going, multiple ones, and how I kind of brainstorm these lists and then keep track of them all as well. So my advice is to start writing absolutely every idea that you have down. Before you can get to the point of even wondering if it's good or not, or if you're going to pursue it, just write it down. For me, I have like this master list in my notes app, and almost daily I'm just adding to it, just anything. If I'm out, say for like a walk, and I see something that could potentially, work in the future, I'll just write it down. And then from there, every now and then I'll start to kind of like go to that list and maybe pick things out if they interest me. So for me, I now have multiple projects, like long-term projects going all the time. And some of them are more like serious than others. You know, there's usually one that's at the forefront. But in the past, I always thought, okay, I can only be working on one project at once. But what I've learned now is it's nice to have like different options to choose from. So say you have like a master project that your focus is on. The cool thing is like if you say need a break and you want to just get out and you just want to shoot for fun, well, you can go to your like list of projects that you're working on. You can just pick one, and all of a sudden that just gives you like a little bit of direction now for that day of shooting. So I'll go through a few that I have here just to use as an example. I've been using this app for this called Milanote, I believe it's called. I'm actually going to do a complete video on this just because it's been pretty incredible for helping me like navigate and keep on top of these different projects. So like I said, I'll use the Notes app just as like a brain dump for ideas, but like the projects that I'm working on go into this app, and it's a way for me to like add ideas to those, add inspiration to them, and just kind of revisit it if I need to kind of catch up with one and maybe pick one for a day of shooting. But you can see here I have 6 different projects, and ignore these names. Most of these are purely just like descriptions. These aren't title projects or anything like that yet. So I have one down here. So this Home on the River, again, that is just a random description for this project that I was talking about earlier. I have one here called Walking the Fence Line. This is like a conceptual project that I've just started on. I'm quite excited about. I have another one here called Country Roads. Again, just a random title. This is based around these, like the countryside and the roads kind of surrounding my house here, you know, just these landscapes and these environments that are kind of dispersed throughout these towns and cities. That's like a black and white project that I'm working on. Wales coal, that's exploring like the coal and the slate industries up in Wales, some of the black and white work that I've been showing on this channel. I have this one called Quiet Places. This is like more of an abstract project out in the wild. So shooting like little details and movement and trying to kind of evoke some sort of like emotion and tell a story in the wilderness. And then I have one here called Banger Racing. So this is actually exploring like a documentary project about what we would call Demolition Derby back in Canada, but it's called Banger Racing here. So those are kind of like the 6 that I would say I have on the go. I would say my focus is on this one on the river and the Walking the Fence Line project. And some of these are just very simple, you know, they don't even have description under them yet. Like you don't have to come up with an idea and figure it all out. It can be just very loose ideas, but at the very least that helps you go out with a little bit of purpose and direction and not just go and wander aimlessly. So photo projects, so important, and I really do think that for a lot of people who are maybe struggling to find inspiration or excitement in their local area, this is a way to not only, you know, discover more images, but also start developing your voice as a photographer, which I think is very important as well. So hope this helped. Just wanted to talk about it because like I said, I had a lot of answers to that question, and it seems like something that a lot of people struggle with, and I've been there in the past as well, and I know that it kind of sucks when you're not inspired and you feel like you always have to travel and go somewhere to create. So anyways, just want to say, as always, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll talk to you soon.